It took them 5 minutes to search the cramped room for any spy holes or signs of danger. 5 minutes for them to lift the framed paintings on the wood-paneled walls, tap at the floorboards, seal the gap between the door and the floor, and cover the window with Sam's weather-worn black cloak. When she was certain that no one could either hear or see her, Selena ripped off her hood, untied the mask, and whirled to face him. Sam, seated on his small bed, which seemed more like a cot, raised his palms to her. "Before you bite my head off," he said, keeping his voice quiet just in case, "let me say that I went into that meeting knowing as little as you." She glared at him, savoring the fresh air on her sticky, sweaty face. "Oh really? You're not the only one who can improvise." Sam kicked off his boots and hoisted himself farther onto the bed. "That man's as much in love with himself as you are. The last thing we need is for him to know that he had the upper hand in there." Selena dug her nails into her palms. "Why would Arabin send us here without telling us the true reason? Reprimand Rolf for a crime that had nothing to do with him. Maybe Rolf was lying about the content of the letter." She straightened. "That might very well be. He was not lying about the content of the letter, Selena," Sam said. "Why would he bother? He has more important things to do." She grumbled a slew of nasty words and paced, her black boots clunking against the uneven floorboards. Pirate Lord indeed. This was the best room he could offer them. She was a Darlin's assassin, the right arm of Arabin Hamel, not some backstreet harlot. Regardless, Arabin has his reasons. Sam stretched out on his bed and closed his eyes. "Slaves," she spat, dragging a hand through her braided hair. Her fingers caught in the plate. "What business does Arabin have getting involved in the slave trade? We're better than that. We don't need that money." Unless Arabin was lying. Unless all of his extravagant spending was done with non-existent funds. She'd always assumed that his wealth was bottomless. He'd spent a king's fortune on her upbringing, on her wardrobe alone. Fur, silk, jewels, the weekly cost of just keeping herself looking beautiful. Of course, he'd always made it clear that she was to pay him back, and she'd been giving him a cut of her wages to do so, but maybe Arabin wanted to increase what wealth he already had. If Ben were alive, he wouldn't have stood for it. Ben would have been as disgusted as she was. Being hired to kill corrupt government officials was one thing, but taking prisoners of war, brutalizing them until they stopped fighting back, and sentencing them to a lifetime of slavery. Sam opened an eye. "Are you going to take a bath? Or can I go first?" She hurled her cloak at him. He caught it with a single hand and tossed it to the ground. She said, "I'm going first." "Of course you are." She shot him a dirty look and stormed into the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. Of all the dinners she'd ever attended, this was by far the worst. Not because of the company, which was, she grudgingly admitted, somewhat interesting, and not because of the food, which looked and smelled wonderful, but simply because she couldn't eat anything, thanks to that confounded mask. Sam, of course, seemed to take second helpings of everything solely to mock her. Selena, seated at Rolf's left, half hoped the food was poisoned. Sam had only served himself from the array of meats and stews after watching Rolf eat some himself, so the likelihood of that wish coming true was rather low. "Mistress Sardothian," Rolf said, his dark brows rising high on his forehead, "you must be famished. Or is my food not pleasing enough for your refined palate?" Beneath the cape and the cloak and the dark tunic, Selena was not just famished, but also hot and tired, and thirsty, which, combined with her temper, usually turn out to be a lethal combination. Of course, they couldn't see any of that. "I'm quite fine," she lied, swirling the water in her goblet. It lapped against the sides, taunting her with each rotation. Selena stopped. "Maybe if you took off your mask, you might have an easier time eating," Rolf said, taking a bite of roasted duck. "Unless what lies beneath it will make us lose our appetites." The 5 other pirates, all captains in Rolf's fleet, sniggered. "Keep talking like that." Selena gripped the stem of her goblet. "And I might give you a reason to wear a mask." Sam kicked her under the table, and she kicked him back, a deft blow to his shins, hard enough that he choked on his water. Some of the assembled captains stopped laughing, but Rolf chuckled. She rested her gloved hand atop the stained dining table. The table was freckled with burns and deep gouges. It had clearly seen its fair share of brawls. Didn't Rolf have any taste for luxury? Perhaps he wasn't so well off, if he was resorting to the slave trade. But Arabin was as rich as the king of a Darlin himself. Rolf flicked his sea-green eyes to Sam, who was frowning yet again. Have you seen her without the mask? Sam, to her surprise, grimaced. Once. He gave her an all-too-believably wary look. And that was enough. Rolf studied Sam for a heartbeat, then took another bite of his meat. Well, if you won't show me your face, then perhaps you'll indulge us with the tale of how, exactly, you became protégé to Arabin Hamel. I trained, she said dully, for years. We aren't all lucky enough to have a magic map inked on our hands. Some of us had to climb to the top. Rolf stiffened, and the other pirates halted their eating. He stared at her long enough for Selena to want to squirm, and then set down his fork. Sam leaned a bit closer to her, but she realized, only to see better as Rolf laid both of his hands palm up on the table. Together, his hands formed a map of their continent, and only that. This map hasn't moved for 8 years. His voice was a low growl. A chill went down her spine. 8 years. Exactly the time that had passed since the Fae had been banished and executed, when a Darlin had conquered and enslaved the rest of the continent and magic had disappeared. Don't think, Rolf continued, withdrawing his hands, that I haven't had to claw and kill my way as much as you. If he was nearly 30, then he'd probably done even more killing than she had. And, from the many scars on his hands and face, it was easy to tell that he'd done a lot of clawing. Good to know we're kindred spirits, she said. If Rolf was already used to getting his hands dirty, then trading slaves wasn't stretch. But he was a filthy pirate. They were Arabin Hamel's assassins. Educated, wealthy, refined. Slavery was beneath them. Rolf gave her that crooked smile. Do you act like this because it's actually in your nature? Or is it just because you're afraid of dealing with people? I'm the world's greatest assassin. She lifted her chin. I'm not afraid of anyone. Really? Rolf asked. Because I'm the world's greatest pirate, and I'm afraid of a great number of people. That's how I've managed to stay alive for so long. She didn't deign to reply. Slave-mongering pig. He shook his head, smiling in exactly the same way she smirked at Sam when she wanted to piss him off. I'm surprised Arabin hasn't made you check your arrogance, Rolf said. Your companion seems to know when to keep his mouth shut. Sam coughed loudly and leaned forward. How did you become Pirate Lord then? Rolf ran a finger along a deep groove in the wooden table. I killed every pirate who was better than me. The 3 other captains, all older, all more weathered and far less attractive than him, huffed but didn't refute it. Anyone arrogant enough to think they couldn't possibly lose to a young man with a patchwork crew and only one ship to his name. But they all fell one by one. When you get a reputation like that, people tend to flock to you. Rolf glanced between Selena and Sam. You want my advice? He asked her. No, I'd watch your back around, Sam. You might be the best, Sardothian, but there's always someone waiting for you to slip. Sam, the traitorous bastard, didn't hide his smirk. The other pirate captains chuckled. Selena stared hard at Rolf. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She'd eat later, swipe something from the tavern kitchens. You want my advice? He waved a hand, beckoning her to go on. Mind your own business. Rolf gave her a lazy smile. I don't mind, Rolf, Sam mused later into the pitch darkness of their room. Selena, who'd taken first watch, glared toward where his bed lay against the far wall. Of course you don't, she grumbled, relishing the free air on her face. Seated on her bed, she leaned against the wall and picked at the threads on the blanket. He told you to assassinate me. Sam chuckled. It is wise advice. She rolled up the sleeves of her tunic. Even at night, this rotten place was scorching hot. Perhaps it isn't a wise idea for you to go to sleep then. Sam's mattress groaned as he turned over. Come on, you can't take a bit of teasing. Where my life is concerned. No, Sam snorted. Believe me, if I came home without you, Arabin would skin me alive. Literally. If I'm going to kill you, Selena, it'll be when I can actually get away with it. She scowled. I appreciate that. She fanned her sweating face with a hand. She'd sell her soul to a pack of demons for a cool breeze right now, but they had to keep the window covered, unless she wanted some spying pair of eyes to discover what she looked like. Though, now that she thought about it, she'd love to see the look on Rolf's face if he found out the truth. Most already knew that she was a young woman, but if he knew he was dealing with a 16-year-old, his pride might never recover. They'd only be here for 3 nights. They could both go without a little sleep if it meant keeping her identity and their lives safe. Selena. Sam asked into the dark. Should I worry about going to sleep? She blinked, then laughed under her breath. At least Sam took her threats somewhat seriously. She wished she could say the same for Rolf. No, she said. Not tonight. Some other night, then, he mumbled. Within minutes, he was out. Selena rested her head against the wooden wall, listening to the sound of his breathing as the long hours of the night stretched by. Even when her turn to sleep came, Selena lay awake. In the hours she'd spent watching over their room, one thought had become increasingly problematic. The slaves. Perhaps if Arabin had sent someone else. Perhaps if it was just a business deal that she found out about later, when she was too busy to care, she might not have been so bothered by it. But to send her to retrieve a shipment of slaves, people who had done nothing wrong, only dare to fight for their freedom and the safety of their families. How could Arabin expect her to do that? If Ben had been alive, she might have found an ally in him. Ben, despite his profession, was the most compassionate person she knew. His death left a vacancy that she didn't think could ever be filled. She sweated so much that her sheets became damp, and slept so little that when dawn came, she felt like she'd been trampled by a herd of wild horses from the Iowa grasslands. Sam finally nudged her, a none too gentle prodding with the pommel of his sword. He said, "You look horrible." Deciding to let that set the tone for the day, Selena got out of bed and promptly slammed the bathroom door. When she emerged a while later, as fresh as she could get using only the wash basin in her hands, she understood one thing with perfect clarity. There was no way in any realm of hell, that she was going to bring those slaves to Rifthold. Rolf could keep them for all she cared, but she wouldn't be the one to transport them to the capital city. That meant she had 2 days to figure out how to ruin Arabin and Rolf's deal, and find a way to come out of it alive. She slung her cape over her shoulders, silently bemoaning the fact that the yards of fabric concealed much of her lovely black tunic, especially its delicate golden embroidery. Well, at least her cape was also exquisite, even if it was a bit dirty from so much traveling. "Where are you going?" Sam asked. He sat up from where he lounged on the bed, cleaning his nails with the tip of a dagger. Sam definitely wouldn't help her. She'd have to find a way to get out of the deal on her own. "I have some questions to ask Rolf." Alone, she fastened her mask and strode to the door. "I want breakfast waiting for me when I return." Sam went rigid, his lips forming a thin line. "What?" Selena pointed to the hallway, toward the kitchen. "Breakfast," she said slowly. "I'm hungry." Sam opened his mouth, and she waited for the retort, but it never came. He bowed deeply. "As you wish," he said. They swapped particularly vulgar gestures before she stalked down the hallway, dodging puddles of filth, vomit, and the gods knew what else. Selena found it just a tad difficult to match Rolf's long stride. With rain clouds gathering overhead, many of the people in the street, ragged pirates swaying where they stood, prostitutes stumbling past after a long night, barefoot orphans running amok, had begun migrating into the various ramshackle buildings. Skulls Bay wasn't a beautiful city by any definition, and many of the leaning and sagging buildings seemed to have been constructed from little more than wooden nails. Aside from its denizens, the city was most famous for Shipbreaker, the giant chain that hung across the mouth of the horseshoe-shaped bay. It had been around for centuries, and was so large that, as its name implied, it could snap the mast of any ship that came up against it. While mostly designed to discourage any attacks, it also kept anyone from sneaking off. And given that the rest of the island was covered with towering mountains, there weren't many other places for a ship to safely dock. So, any ship that wanted to enter or exit the harbor had to wait for it to be lowered under the surface, and be ready to pay a hefty fee. "You have 3 blocks, Rolf said. "Better make them count." Was he deliberately walking fast? Steadying her rising temper, Selena focused on the jagged, lush mountains hovering around the city, on the glittering curve of the bay, on the hint of sweetness in the air. She found Rolf just about to leave the tavern to go to a business meeting, and he'd agreed to let her ask questions as he walked. "When the slaves arrive," she said, trying to sound as inconvenienced as possible, "will I get the chance to inspect them, or can I trust that you're giving us a good batch?" He shook his head at her impertinence, and Selena jumped over the outstretched legs of an unconscious, or dead, drunk in her path. "They'll arrive tomorrow afternoon." I was planning to inspect them myself, but if you're so worried about the quality of your wares, I'll allow you to join me. Consider it a privilege." She snorted. "Where?" "On your ship." Better to get a good sense of how everything worked, and then build her plan from there. Knowing how things operated might create some ideas for how to make the deal fall apart with as little risk as possible. I've converted a large stable at the other end of the town into a holding facility. I usually examine all the slaves there, but since you're leaving the next morning, we'll examine yours on the ship itself." She clicked her tongue loudly enough for him to hear it. "And how long can I expect this to take?" He raised an eyebrow. "You have better things to do. Just answer the question." Thunder rumbled in the distance. They reached the docks, which were by far the most impressive thing about the town. Ships of all shapes and sizes rocked against the wooden piers, and pirates scurried along the decks, tying down various things before the storm hit. On the horizon, lightning flashed above the lone watchtower perched along the northern entrance to the bay, the watchtower from which Shipbreaker was raised and lowered. In the flash, she'd also seen the 2 catapults atop one of the tower landings. If Shipbreaker didn't destroy a boat, then those catapults finished the job. "Don't worry, Mistress Sardothian," Rolf said, striding past the various taverns and inns that lined the docks. They had 2 blocks left. "Your time won't be wasted, though getting through 100 slaves will take a while." 100 slaves on one ship. Where do they all fit? "As long as you don't try to fool me," she snapped. "I'll consider it time well spent. So you don't find reasons to complain, and I'm sure you'll try your best to do just that. I have another shipment of slaves being inspected at the holding facility tonight. Why don't you join me? That way, you can have something to compare them to tomorrow." That would be perfect, actually. Perhaps she could merely claim the slaves weren't up to par and refuse to do business with him, and then leave. No harm done to either of them. She'd still have to face Sam, and then Arabin, but she'd figure them out later. She waved a hand. Fine. Send someone for me when it's time." The humidity was so thick she felt as if she were swimming through it. And after Arabin's slaves are inspected, any bit of information could later be used as a weapon against him. "Are they mine to look after on the ship, or will your men be watching them for me? Your pirates might very well think they're free to take whatever slaves they wish." Rolf clenched the hilt of his sword. It glinted in the muted light, and she admired the intricate pommel, shaped like a sea dragon's head. "If I give the order that no one is to touch your slaves, then no one will touch them," Rolf said through his teeth. His annoyance was an unexpected delight. "However, I'll arrange to have a few guards on the ship, if that will make you sleep easier. I wouldn't want Arabin to think I don't take his investment seriously." They approached a blue-painted tavern, where several men in dark tunics lounged out front. At the sight of Rolf, they straightened, saluting him. His guards? Why hadn't anyone escorted him through the streets? "That will be fine," she said crisply. "I don't want to be here any longer than necessary. I'm sure you're eager to return to your clients in Rifthold." Rolf stopped in front of the faded door. The sign above it, swinging in the growing storm winds, said the SEA Dragon. It was also the name of his famed ship, which was docked just behind them, and really didn't look all that spectacular anyway. Perhaps this was the Pirate Lord's headquarters. And if he was making her and Sam stay at that tavern a few blocks away, then perhaps he trusted them as little as they trusted him. "I think I'm more eager to return to civilized society," she said sweetly. Rolf let out a low growl and stepped onto the threshold of the tavern. Inside, it was all shadows and murmuring voices, and reeked of stale ale. Other than that, she could see nothing. "One day," Rolf said, too quietly, "someone's really going to make you pay for that arrogance." Lightning made his green eyes flicker. "I just hope I'm there to see it." He shut the tavern door in her face. Selena smiled, and her smile grew wider as fat drops of rain splattered on the rust-colored earth, instantly cooling the muggy air. That had gone surprisingly well. "Is it poisoned?" she asked Sam, plopping down on her bed as a clap of thunder shook the tavern to its foundations. The teacup rattled in its saucer, and she breathed in the smell of fresh-baked bread, sausage, and porridge as she threw back her hood and removed her mask. "By them, or by me?" Sam was sitting on the floor, his back against the bed. Selena sniffed all her food. "Do I detect belladonna?" Sam gave her a flat stare, and Selena smirked as she tore a bite from the bread. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the scrape of her utensils against the chipped plates the drumming of the rain on the roof, and the occasional groan of a thunderhead breaking. "So," Sam said, "are you going to tell me what you're planning? Or should I warn Rolf to expect the worst?" She sipped daintily at her tea. "I don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about, Sam Cortland. What sort of questions did you ask him?" She set down her teacup. Rain lashed the shutters, muffling the clink of her cup against the saucer. "Polite ones." "Oh, I didn't think you knew what polite meant. I can be polite when it pleases me. When it gets you what you want, you mean? So what is it you want from Rolf?" She studied her companion. He certainly didn't seem to have any qualms about the deal. While he might not trust Rolf, it didn't bother him that 100 innocent souls were about to be traded like cattle. I wanted to ask him more about the map on his hands. "Damn it, Selena." Sam slammed his fist onto the wooden floor. "Tell me the truth." "Why?" she asked, giving him a pout. "And how do you know I'm not telling the truth?" Sam got to his feet and began pacing the length of their small room. He undid the top button of his black tunic, revealing the skin beneath. Something about it felt strangely intimate, and Selena found herself quickly looking away from him. "We've grown up together." Sam stopped at the foot of her bed. "You think I don't know how to tell when you're cooking up some scheme? What do you want from Rolf?" If she told him, he'd do everything in his power to prevent her from ruining the deal. And having one enemy was enough. With her plans still unformed, she had to keep Sam out of it. Besides, if worse came to worst, Rolf might very well kill Sam for being involved. Or simply for knowing her. "Maybe I'm just unable to resist how handsome he is," she said. Sam went rigid. "He's 12 years older than you." So, he didn't think she was serious, did he? He gave her a look so scathing it could have turned her to ash, and he stalked to the window, ripping his cloak down. "What are you doing?" He flung open the wooden shutters to reveal a sky full of rain and forked lightning. "I'm sick of suffocating. And if you're interested in Rolf, he's bound to find out what you look like at some point, isn't he? So why bother slowly roasting to death? Shut the window." He only crossed his arms. "Shut it," she growled. When he made no move to close the window, she jumped to her feet, upsetting the tray of food on her mattress, and shoved him aside hard enough for him to take a step back. Keeping her head down, she shut the window and shutters and threw his cape over the whole thing. "Idiot," she seethed. "What's gotten into you?" Sam stepped closer, his breath hot on her face. "I'm tired of all the melodrama and nonsense that happens whenever you wear that ridiculous mask and cloak. And I'm even more tired of you ordering me around. So that's what this was about. Get used to it." She made a turn to her bed, but he grabbed her wrist. "Whatever plan you're concocting, whatever bit of intrigue you're about to drag me into, just remember that you're not head of the Assassin's Guild yet. You still answer to Arabin." She rolled her eyes, yanking her wrist out of his grasp. "Touch me again," she said, striding to her bed and picking up the spilled food, "and you'll lose that hand." Sam didn't speak to her after that.